Trump's attempt to pressure Iran appears to be backfiring, with Tehran showing little sign of being shaken by the siege. Tehran is reportedly finding new ways to bypass the US naval blockade and keep its trade networks moving. Secret exports and overland trade routes suggest that Iran's business strategy may be far less disturbed than Washington hoped. Trump's siege may have been doomed from the start if Iran was always prepared to absorb the pressure. Now, with the strategy failing to deliver results, the president may be more willing to move toward peace.
I will say the war in Iran is going along swimmingly. We can do whatever we want. And it should be ending pretty soon.
Donald Trump's efforts to block Hormuz and push Iranians toward despair have now run into a serious new roadblock. The American blockade of Hormuz and Iran's ports is unlikely to change much for ordinary Iranians, according to this analysis. The report says the country has diversified the ways it sells oil and has become highly skilled at keeping the trade alive. An Al Jazeera report offered this analysis of the ongoing US blockade and its limited effect on Iran. Earlier, an Iranian minister said the country would not be significantly affected by any blockade, insisting that Tehran has the resilience and alternatives to absorb the pressure. Iran has more than 8,000 kilometers of land and sea borders, and the minister said that Tehran can neutralize any blockade by relying on border trade. Ali Hashim said, and I quote, "The country has diversified the ways in which it sells oil abroad. They have been selling oil with other names and mastering the business of smuggling it outside the national borders. It's going to be very challenging for the US to make Iran feel the heat more because it's already living in the heat." End quote. The analysis comes as reports suggest Iran could maintain oil production despite the blockade. Iran could continue producing oil for up to 2 months even though its exports have been completely halted, according to a new report released late this week. The United States is currently blockading Iranian ports in an attempt to intensify pressure on Tehran and force the regime into making concessions during ongoing negotiations over a broader regional deal. However, recent maritime data suggests that cargo ships have been openly flouting the US naval blockade by continuing to move in and out of Iranian waters despite the official restrictions. If the blockade is eventually enforced in a much stricter and more complete manner, Iran may still be able to withstand the economic and supply chain pressure for roughly 2 months before it begins to feel severe strain. After that 2-month window, Iran may be forced to start cutting back its oil output significantly if the US blockade on its key ports remains in place without any relief or loosening of sanctions. The halting of regular exports would place steadily increasing pressure on Iran's already stretched oil storage capacity, filling up its tanks and making it harder to manage ongoing production. The blockade could prevent approximately 2 million barrels of crude oil per day from reaching Iran's main buyer, China, disrupting a major pillar of Tehran's energy export economy. If Iran is forced to shut down substantial parts of its production, those lost barrels would add to more than 12 million barrels per day of disrupted global oil supply already caused by other conflicts and sanctions around the world. These predictions were made by the well-known energy consultancy FG Nexant ECA, as reported by the international news agency Reuters on April 15th. Iran currently has about 90 million barrels of crude oil stored in its domestic facilities, according to the same consultancy whose figures were cited by Reuters in its latest report. The energy consultancy company said, quote, "Iran can sustain current production of around 3.5 million BPD for roughly 2 months without exports extendable to around 3 months with a modest 500,000 BPD production cut." With its exports blocked, Iran faces having to divert crude into onshore storage tanks. Once those tanks are filled, Tehran would be required to curb upstream output. Unquote. The co-founder of Energy Aspects said, quote, "The blockade may not have a significant impact on Iranian production in April, but if it continues into May, then output would need to be reduced substantially." Unquote. After a series of setbacks on the battlefield, the United States has escalated its economic pressure campaign against Iran, tightening financial and trade restrictions to further squeeze the Iranian economy. On April 15th, the U.S. Treasury Secretary warned countries that continue to buy Iranian oil in the middle of the ongoing Middle East conflict that they now face heightened risks of penalties and sanctions. Scott Bessent announced plans to impose sanctions on nations and institutions that purchase Iranian oil, a move reported by Reuters as part of a broader effort to isolate Tehran financially. That warning came as the U.S. naval blockade on Iranian ports, aimed at cutting off Tehran's main revenue streams, entered its 3rd day in the Strait of Hormuz region. Bessent indicated that the new measures will particularly impact China, which has historically been the largest importer of Iranian crude oil and petroleum products. Before the America-Iran conflict intensified, China accounted for more than 80% of Iran's shipped oil exports, making it the single most important buyer in Tehran's trade network. U.S. officials now expect Beijing to scale back its purchases of Iranian oil under mounting financial and diplomatic pressure linked to the expanded sanctions regime. As part of the crackdown, Besant has already warned 2 Chinese banks, citing what he described as proof of their involvement in facilitating payments or transactions related to Iranian oil trade. Similar warnings have also been sent to financial institutions in Hong Kong, the United Arab Emirates, and Oman, according to Reuters, signaling a wider area enforcement push. Amid the simmering tensions in the region that have been building for weeks, Iran has reached out directly to China through high-level diplomatic channels to urgently discuss the implications of the ongoing U.S. naval blockade in key strategic waters. In a stark warning during these discussions, Iran explicitly cautioned China about the highly dangerous and far-reaching consequences that could arise from what they describe as provocative U.S. military action specifically in the Hormuz Strait. According to recent reports from reliable sources, Iran's Deputy Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi held an important phone conversation with his counterpart, Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi, to address these pressing regional security concerns. The specific details and key highlights of this significant conversation between the 2 diplomats were exclusively revealed in a detailed Al Jazeera report that was published on April 15th. During the call, Araghchi clearly stated that the aggressive U.S. positioning and military deployments in this vital international waterway would inevitably lead to a highly complicated and potentially explosive situation for all parties involved. The Iranian minister went on to emphasize with strong conviction that such provocative military movements by the U.S. in the area pose a direct and serious threat not just to immediate interests but to the broader regional stability across the Middle East. In his response during the phone discussion, as noted in the report, China's Foreign Minister Wang Yi praised the remarkable resilience and steadfast determination of the Iranian people in the face of these mounting external pressures. Wang Yi also reaffirmed with clear assurance Beijing's unwavering readiness and commitment to assist Iran in advancing constructive diplomatic efforts aimed at de-escalating the current crisis. This critical diplomatic call between Iran and China took place on the very same day that US President Donald Trump publicly announced his intention to reopen and secure the Strait of Hormuz amid escalating naval tensions. Trump said, quote, "China is very happy that I am permanently opening the Strait of Hormuz. I am doing it for them, also, and the world. This situation will never happen again. They have agreed not to send weapons to Iran. President, she will give me a big, fat hug when I get there in a few weeks. We are working together smartly, and very well. Doesn't that beat fighting? But remember, we are very good at fighting, if we have to, far better than anyone else." A potential breakthrough may be emerging in efforts to secure a peace agreement between the United States and Iran. On April 15th, Pakistan's Army Chief Asim Munir visited Tehran to deliver a message from US President Donald Trump. Following the talks between Pakistan and Iran, reports indicate that limited progress may have been achieved on key issues. A senior Iranian official suggested that an extension of the ceasefire and a second round of negotiations with the US appear likely. Iranian sources also indicated that Munir's visit contributed to easing some areas of tension with Washington. However, Iran's nuclear program and its stockpile of enriched uranium continue to remain major unresolved issues. The Iran official said, and I quote, "The trip of the Pakistani army chief to Tehran was effective in reducing differences in some areas, but fundamental disagreements still remain in the nuclear field. More hopes have been created for extending the ceasefire and holding a second round of talks. The fate of Iran's highly enriched uranium and the duration of Iran's nuclear restrictions are among the highly disputed issues for which no solution has yet been found." End quote. On April 14th, President Trump stated in an interview with Fox News that he believes the conflict with Iran could conclude in the near future. There is, however, no official confirmation regarding the timeline for a second round of talks between Iran and the United States. Iran has maintained that any meaningful breakthrough will depend on whether the United States demonstrates genuine intent toward peace.
Iran is going along swimmingly. We can do whatever we want. And it should be ending pretty soon. It was perfect. We had to do a little journey down to Iran, and I didn't want to do that, but we had to because we can't let them have a nuclear weapon. Can't let them have a nuclear weapon. And despite our little diversion to the lovely country of Iran, lovely place, but we had to do that because otherwise bad things could happen, really bad things. So we've sent out, and I think you're going to see some incredible results, for those people that question it. You're going to see some, the job we've done has been amazing. The ships are out there today, and they're saying, don't come here, don't even think about it. And you have these massive tankers saying, let's get the hell out of here. It's amazing. It's amazing. Booming. You don't read about it. You don't see it so much because of what's going on in Iran, which is really, it's been 2 months. 2 months. You've been in other wars for 18 years, 4 years with me. I'm in there for a month. Well, he said he'd get out a month. Did you see where I did a list last week? 17 years in Vietnam and 5 years in Afghanistan and more, much more than that, and all these different places. And I said, we were in there for 2 months. And you know what? We're going to have victory very shortly. This is not... And against a very tough, smart country. These people were fighters. And, I don't want to claim it before the fact, but they have no Navy left. 158 ships at the bottom of the sea. 158, think of it. 158. I got angry. I said, why didn't you save them? We could have used them, They would rather shoot them than save them. I said, what the hell? It's only money. But some of them were good. They had one named the Soleimani. You know what the Soleimani? We took him out. He was the worst, one of the worst terrorists in the history of this country, this world. They killed many of our people. Many of our people have been killed. When you see a young soldier mostly going around without legs, without arms, with their faces so badly injured, it was Soleimani that did that. The roadside bombs, they were just terrible. He was the father of the roadside bomb. We killed him. And that had a big impact on Iran. Because he was, I think it maybe would be a different story if he were around. He was a horrible person, a horrible human being. He was a mad genius, but it probably would have been more difficult. We still would have won by fast, but it would have been not probably as fast as it has gone.
$25 करोड़ गरीब गरीबी को परास्त करके बाहर निकले।
For the good of our nation, let's work together and let's truly make America great again.
The fastest news breaks.
Requested PM saying that look, you will have to speak to Putin and to Zelensky.
The biggest news makers.
The relationship with India is probably the most important bilateral relationship the U.S. will have for the rest of this century.
The capital delivered quite an election result today.
Expert analysis.
The million-dollar question today is how to stop this dance of death.
Ground reports.
I'm standing at the crossroad of the Kumbh Mela. Behind me are more than 100 entry guards.
Long-form interviews.
Exclusionary politics is reflected in Manipur case as well. You don't bother because this is a small state.
Deep dive into burning issues.
It's often said DRC could be the richest country in the whole world. It's because of what sits underneath.
Why exactly did the US topple the Sheikh Hasina government?
HT videos. We don't just break news, we break it down.